Presumably.
Okay. So
We are live.
So I'm going to sign on.
Yeah, you should be able to sign on right now. And
it's Facebook, right?
Yes, we are on Facebook. Although this will be posted on YouTube when we're done. Share to groups. Yeah, what the heck? Oh, share to some groups. I don't know what I'm actually doing, but
there you are.
do I exist?
I can totally see you. You're actually doing stuff. I just liked you.
Oh, isn't that special?
And I just shared a public now to you. And then how do I make this happen? Oh, there you are. It's so distracting. Why don't you write something in the comments so I can see if I can see it?
I'm gonna in a second. I gotta close some stuff off.
You could mute yourself if
There's
you don't
actually
want them to
people
hear you
here.
loudly.
Hi, people.
I don't see anybody.
I gotta find the chat box.
I'm
We'll
see.
get going here in just a few minutes. We're gonna start right at 6.
Hey, Stephanie.
I never actually know where my chat box is.
I'm looking at it right now, so I can yell at it.
If you put something in the chat box, I might be able to find mine.
I did already.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and I also responded to Stephanie.
Oh, well, then I'm obviously not seeing my chat box. It's always a challenge for
Under
me.
comments over there, it's not coming in.
No,
It's-
I know that.
Yeah, so that's where it is.
I know. It's
Can
just
you make this big?
it's no. So there's a challenge always. So that I can make bigger, but that doesn't give me my
I
chat.
thought it might throw it up on the corner.
So
And
I
Vicky
will.
says, we're watching you.
I'm very afraid.
I said it with intonation, I was assuming.
No, that is not my chat box. Well, hopefully I don't delete the whole thing here by accident.
Two things. David Winston.
That's just. Oh, and actually, if you can, what was the name of David's formula? Because I don't know what all's in
The blueberry extract and the insight compound.
Insight. Yes,
Yeah.
I didn't know that
I'm
one.
super familiar with that, which is probably why. So we're going to say eye health.
I should know what's in all of his formulas.
No, you shouldn't. I actually have the recipes if you ever want them.
All right. Well, yeah, that's right. He's got them in one of his books. There we go. Herbs and formulas. Man, he's got all kinds of interesting formulas. Much as I talk about him, I probably should know his stuff. There we
Well,
go.
he develops and moves forward with it too, so it's bound to change.
Oh,
I
that's
actually have
nice.
a problem with one of them, and she actually is bringing it up, and I was going to say, which is very interesting. So we're going to say pricey. Yes, they are.
Yeah, well, there is that.
Some medicine making techniques to make it ourselves. Yes, come to medicine making class. Solid extract of blueberry juice concentrate, fruit, apple concentrate. Inside compound is a tincture of chrysanthemum,
That's funny.
lyceum, ginkgo, blueberry juice. Is the
Yeah, well,
compound
I don't see it.
used for the
I know it's
apple
written down there.
Take
It's
it
so weird that I
fast.
can't see the comments. I don't understand that at all.
I've never.
And
come
it's
across
been
it
an
in my
issue
life.
before.
It's yummy, concentrate. Do you know what's really funny is we just made this compound. I just had
Oh, did we really?
Trisha make it for one of our clients. For the one that has the MRSA infection, we did one for a vascular. I had her make a compound, and she's like, "What the hell is that?" It's like,
Yeah, we got 6 people on board.
so
Yay,
more
us.
about medicine making.
All right, we'll get started here in a few minutes, folks. We're going to start right at 6, which is in 10 minutes.
Okay, so we're gonna write down.
Full screen.
Okay, so
Add tools. No, I just want to see my chat. Oh, well, you're going to have to read it to me when it gets exciting.
I will. And maybe it'll just it looks like it's still trying to buffer.
No, it's just being weird. It does. I've only gotten the chat up once or twice all the times we've done this. So,
Interesting.
if you're hanging out there, Let us know where you're from. I know we get some people far afield. Kristen is
Carolina.
up in Carolinas. We've had a few folks over in Europe and Canada and a few other places. It's always interesting to see that we're reaching that far afield. I think it's cool. So let us know where you're from, and we will get started in 10 minutes.
Okay, so I made a short version here, and I highlighted the things that were important. And,
Cool.
and so we're going to go to number 3.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know if
note-
you'd read them all yet.
Yep.
Because I read through them.
Do you need me to hand it back to you?
No.
Atlanta, Georgia, Arroyo.
Oh, nice.
I wonder how the weather is up there right now, because I wish it was
I'm saying.
not as hot as it is here already. I think it's funny when they think the questions are odd ones. I'm like, you have no idea.
Yeah, right. Those are really normal questions, actually. They're all really good questions.
Amber teething necklace. Yep.
Oops. Yep. I don't really care about the printer. Not going to deal with that right now. I'm sure that will pop up 6 more times while we're talking. So believe it or not, after tonight, Renee and I actually are not scheduled for anything for 2 whole days. It's a miracle. We're
Well, we
not
actually have something tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, but we don't have to do that. We're choosing to do that. And, I just tasked myself with doing a few other things. But that's besides the point. We'll do it on our own accord. And with
So-
shorts on and no shoes.
Stephanie's in Florida, she says.
Oh, I assumed that's Stephanie, who was our student.
Nope.
No?
Well, maybe.
Mm.
Um,
It's such a rare thing that we get a day off, so the fact that we have 2 days off is super rocking, and it will give us a chance. I think I've got class next weekend for my Chinese students that we're doing medicine making for them, and if any of you are acupuncturists who want fancier medicine making, shoot us an email. We can try to get you into the class. I think we've got space. And then in a couple of weeks, it's so funny, we've got the pet care weekend intensive coming up. And the first time I think we've gotten, we've been doing this since December, the open forum at the end of the last Friday of every month. And all of a sudden we got like 4 animal questions. I was like, okay.
and we're doing it, and we're doing an animal. And
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
comes
even
here.
though we weren't like putting it out there, all of a sudden, like lots and lots of animal questions.
Bob, do you know the Chinese name for succinic acid, which is like amber?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to need to talk about that. That's part of one of the things that's going to come up. I have more to say about this than you.
It's amber is who something.
Okay, so we can. That's fine. But I'm saying I have more to say about this than you.
You think?
No, I do.
What if I
Wait
want to
till you
make
hear it.
dinosaurs?
It's good. Well, that's fine. That's not what it's about. So you have a lot of dinosaur things to say, and that's not what it's about at all. And so,
Hupo. There we go.
so what is it?
Hupo. Hupo. I was like, it was who something.
Okay, so I'm going to put it here so that you'll know what I'm talking about when we discuss it. And I have so much to say about this from a practice that you're not aware of, which is really just like, yeah. So hold
Well,
on.
we can do a general discussion of resins, because I got one of my students text me about a different resin just this afternoon.
Yeah, that's actually, it goes the gamut of accessibility, like internally versus not, to
And also,
backs of slaves.
and I was going to
that
say, there's a
whole-
sustainable issue
Yes,
with it
that was
all
actually
as
one of
well.
the, that's one of the things, so we'll spread that whole thing out. I need to make sure I have my phone, because sometimes I can get the questions from everybody from there.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna run around for a second
Okay.
trying to find.
And we
my
got
phone.
5 minutes. I can call you. I'm just doing a little song and dance for 5 more minutes till we get started. Hopefully everybody's running and peeing and getting a drink so that you can stay for every exciting moment. And for anybody who like totally can't make it or misses it, we will post this on YouTube probably tonight or tomorrow. Depends how motivated I am. But we've got all of the past ones archived on YouTube, as well as a ton of other cool stuff. So Traditions, School of Herbal Studies should come up right away on YouTube. So one of these days we're going to get all technically correct and get proper microphones, and we may put out a message that we may switch this over to Zoom sometime soon. So it doesn't mean we won't be doing it. We just may not do it on Facebook going forward. Just Facebook's got its own share of glitches, the comments being at least one of them, and we'll probably put it on Zoom so that we can then upload that afterwards to YouTube so that everybody can access it. I find that we're finding more and more people who are actually getting off of Facebook. And Facebook is seeming to get a little cluttered with stuff these days. So in case you haven't noticed, we've changed our venue. Well, this is actually the same venue we've done the last couple times, I think. We've done it, I think we did it from the house once. We've done it from the office, but Eva, one of our acupuncturists, herbalists there, is working later and later, it seems like, every time. So we didn't want to interfere with her working and freak her patients out.
Hey, did you see Vicky's?
I can't see anything.
I was from the Mediterranean, but unfortunately from Brooksville. I wish from the Mediterranean, but unfortunately Brooksville.
Oh, look at that!
Don't be like that. There's some stuff.
Is your volume down? Because mine was like almost all the way down. So now you can probably hear me better. That my volume is up.
There's stuff in Brooksville I can't find anywhere else. It's a wonderful.
Oh yeah,
thing.
plant-wise, that's the truth. There's some great plant medicine up there. It's some of the few terrain features in all of Florida. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, I spent a few months in Brooksville. At Camp Inini, no, I wasn't Ininihasi. That was the one in near Brooksville. Itumaki was in the Everglades, and oh man, I can't think of the camp where I spent like 2 months. Part of the Eckerd Foundation back in the day, and I love driving through Brooksville. There used to be a couple of races I would run there. So this is another wall. So usually we're projecting the other wall, and I was like, it's nothing but a dry erase board there behind us. So I moved the tables over today so you can see some of the cool stuff behind us. So this is our classroom. We got 3 minutes. This is a classroom at the school, and there's no students here at the moment. So we're just doing this one live and online, or online, I should say.
If Kristen is on already...
She might be.
Yeah, if Kristen is on already, I'm going to look and see if I see you. I'm super happy for you to bring up, I don't see her yet. She wants to bring up the pet conversation, the pet class, and more stuff she wanted to do. She didn't actually have a question in there. She had multiple questions. And so she can just fire them in, and we'll talk to everybody about that.
And I will say, Renee is monitoring the chat, so we've got another 2 minutes before we get started. If anybody is like chomping at the bit to throw out their question, now's the time to, we can put it in the queue. We've got a few people who emailed us a few questions, as always, which is always super nice. But we definitely can cover everything that's already been emailed to us. We've got plenty of time and space. Yeah, I know. And I don't think we didn't talk about that the other day. It's just ghost pipes come up a lot, so we'll talk about that here shortly. We got some good questions about herbs and herb-drug interactions and pet stuff. And actually, I got that email from somebody whose kid was in the veterinary magnet.
That's Kristen.
Yeah.
Oh no,
that's somebody else.
One
yeah, that's a different person. That's a local person. And I'll kind of talk about that. Maybe we'll throw that in. I'll throw my own question in. And I'm so sorry I'm not able to see everybody's chat. I don't even have a place to type, which is just weird. It's the joy of Facebook. Look one more time.
I have so much to say about ghost pipe too. Hey, Kristen.
Oh, yay, she's there.
I was just saying, if you have the animal, like at the time, whenever, like I'm moderating, if you have questions about animal anything, like add more to that.
And it's 6 o'clock, and it looks like people are jumping on, so we gonna get started. And if you don't know, I'm Bob Linde. I'm an acupuncture physician and a registered herbalist. I practice Western, Chinese herbalism, Caribbean herbal medicine, and anything else I can think of at the time. And this is Renee, hey, who is also a registered herbalist and a Western and traditional herbalist, as well as does cool spiritual stuff. And we are the directors of the Traditional School of Herbal Studies here in St. Petersburg, Florida, just in case you didn't know it. We also got a clinical practice at 2520 Central Avenue in St. Pete. You can find out more at acuherbals.com or traditionsherbschool.com. If you didn't already hear it, we will post this recording on YouTube. You can find this and all of our past open forums, as well as lots of other cool videos that we've done, herb walks and other interesting conversations on our YouTube channel, Traditions Herb School. And wouldn't surprise me if we didn't do a recording or two this weekend. Since we actually have downtime, we'll probably go wandering in the woods somewhere. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to post them. Renee's in there monitoring and will do her best to put them in the queue and put some semblance of order to the madness. And if you don't have any questions, just feel like hanging out, that's okay too. And if you have to cut and run, we'll miss you, but you will find the recording later on YouTube.
Hey. The other thing I'd like to say is we're on a delay, so you get it a couple seconds after we say it, so that if you feel that we're going past a subject that you didn't answer, get a question answered for, it's okay, just put it in and we'll circle back around. I'll make sure that we hear it no matter what. So if you see me give you a like or a thumbs up, that means I heard it, I wrote it down, and we're going to do our best to say it. So I'm writing them down as we speak. And
we sometimes try to group questions together and hit all of them because there's sometimes some overlap with all of it. And upcoming classes, you know, we don't have a lot of open classes coming up at the moment. I didn't grab our class schedule, but I know we've got our pet care intensive, weekend intensive on herbal pet care coming up in 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And we've got my Chinese students, my Chinese herbal class is doing medicine making next weekend. And so, although I can't take necessarily outside people because we'll be saying crazy Chinese words, anybody who is an acupuncture school and like to attend, shoot us an email, or certainly, of course, any acupuncturist who'd like to jump in. We'd encourage it. Right now, I think we only have 10 people in person for that class, and all the rest of them are doing it online. But it's definitely one of those classes that's way more fun in person because we make mud pies and stuff like that. Herbal mud pies.
We don't make mud pies. We make real medicine, not fake medicine.
And you want to throw a question at me?
Yep, if you want
What
to.
you got?
It depends on how you want to start this out.
Oh, just throw something.
Okay, so you have your choice. We can start with the clearing phlegm conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Or,
Yeah. So we actually had a really good question from one of our new foundation students. And it's funny, it really delves into this idea of energetics. And energetics is one of those things that we really kind of harp on a lot. We don't like to talk about this herb is good for that and this herb is that, you know, and the idea that echinacea is for infections and St. John's wort is for depression is really not completely correct. And there are times and places where we might do that for a very narrow focus. But the reality is we tend to use things in combination and formulas, and we tend to look at the energetics. And energetics is this concept, and you're going to hear me harp on this a little bit today. Energetics is kind of this idea that we describe diseases as hot and cold, wet and dry, deficient, excess, tense and lax. And we describe not only the diseases, but we describe the herbs in the same way. And we can describe foods, we can describe medications in that way. And so there's really this endless way that we can create this cohesive system. And this is not unique to the Bob and Renee show. This is repeated in every traditional culture. And whether we're talking Chinese or Ayurvedic or Central and South America or the native people in North America, all of them use this energetic concept of understanding disease and medicine. So one of the questions posed to us was that this one student's friend had this really bad lingering cough. and it keeps them up at night oftentimes. And they were asking about a specific herb, and so they described it nicely. There was a lot of phlegm, but it was clear, if I remember right. Yeah, it was a clear phlegm, which annotates that there's a lack of heat or there's a cold condition going on there. And we've probably all experienced this at some point where we see maybe you get a lung infection, maybe you just catch a head cold or something, and you could do absolutely nothing. You could take herbs, you might take medications, any of the above. And after all of your cold and flu symptoms are gone, you're left with this lingering cough with clear, maybe white phlegm that can go on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And she asked specifically about whether she could use hibiscus, a good tropical plant, to help with this cough. And she had remembered from class that we had said something about it having an affiliation with cough. And there's a couple of problems with that. So although hibiscus might be an option for a very narrow margin, hibiscus is this cooling, moistening herb. So because the phlegm was clear, there was an absence of heat. We would see yellow, green. If there was heat, it might be thick and sticky, or even hard to expectorate, that it had dried in the lungs and was kind of caking in there. So for a lingering cough with clear phlegm, we might ask more questions like, is there acid reflux or something like that? But it was implied that it was in association with after a cold and flu. So again, I don't usually talk about a single herb for an issue, but one of the things we teach a lot about is a local plant called Biden's Alba, Spanish needle, beggar's tick. There's a couple of different common local names for it. But it is so specific for that lingering cough with clear or white phlegm that a teaspoon to a tablespoon of the Biden's chewed up fresh will usually alleviate the cough within about 5 to 15 minutes, and you don't need to repeat the treatment, like a single dose.
But secondarily, you can repeat the treatment, especially
it's
if
a vegetable.
An ongoing thing. It's something that we would use for food 100%. Like that's dirty South food. And if you have it, it's a great pollinator. If it's blooming near you and the person's having the problem, they probably need it, like the doctrine of signature. Plus, with the cardiac issue.
Yeah, I hadn't addressed that yet.
Yeah,
so the other thing is we might, and so hibiscus is in the mallow family, and so all of your mallow family plants, Malvaceae, are mucilaginous, what we call slimalicious. And I'm sure there's an exception, but I want to say most of them are cooling and moistening. And hibiscus is a tropical medicine. I learned about it when I was a kid down in the Bahamas. It's very specific for cardiac health. But in a pinch, we could use it for a lung issue, and we would we would only use it in the case of a cough if it was a dry, sticky, hot cough, because we could moisten it and get all of that dry, stuck phlegm, moistening it, cooling it off so that they could expectorate it and get that crud out of their lungs. They were also concerned with the use of hibiscus in conjunction with, I forget whether they were on medications for hypertension or actually had high blood pressure.
Just if it was if they had hypertension.
And so we always think of it specific for the health and the strength of the heart. And there's a number of ways to think about it. We use red hibiscus and we say doctrine of signatures. Doctrine of signatures is this idea that if something looks like something, it's good for it. And so the red color of hibiscus, and we primarily use the red hibiscus, is good for the blood in the circulatory system, the heart. And it is cooling and nourishing. So we would use it for things like congestive heart failure, easy bruising. It's thought to have a higher concentration of many things in vitamin C. So if there was capillary fragility, if every time you brushed your teeth you were spitting out a bunch of blood because you're busting up your skin in your gums, the hibiscus would be a good solution. That vitamin C would help to strengthen the integrity of the veins and arteries and the skin in general. So in this case, I probably would say stick with the Bidens. If they were really struggling, we could even add in some Sida because of the ephedrine content in the root.
And the
root.
balancing effect.
And yeah, it's a tridoshic, so Sida sp, where there's many species that grow here. The root is the primary part that we would use in a case like that. Of course, it would be a felony if you take that across state lines, so don't give that to your friends.
Well, only the one. The other ones
Yes,
are legal.
So the short answer is you can definitely help it. Go find some weeds in your backyard. That would be your Biden's Alba. And maybe save the hibiscus for after you clear up the cough. And make sure what the cause of the cough is. It's one of those things that could be acid reflux, in which case that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, in a general sense, that was my concern and why I was mentioning that.
Because of high blood pressure.
That we have, like, if there's water in the pericardium, if there's heartburn, and if there's a cough, all of those things mimic each other. And so we really need to make sure we understand what's going on there.
Yeah.
And
So asking questions, and you haven't had that class yet.
It's almost here. Yeah. All right. So we hope that answers what you need. And since you're here, we know you have access to Biden's. Plus, we have it dried at the clinic if you don't feel safe getting it for yourself, but it should be in everybody's yard.
And for any of you, and like, give a thumbs up or a smiley face or something. If any of you are my Chinese herb students, I can't see who else on, or acupuncture students or acupuncture physicians, the Biden's we're talking about is Shen Feng Sao, and is actually in your textbook, in your Medica, XIANFENGCAO. If I remembers right, Shin, yeah. Biden's Alba, and you can actually look in your index and look up Biden's, BIDNDENS. Not our president, but the plant.
Yes, and FYI to that, warning ahead of time, if you just put in Biden's at a site or comment on it, you might get banned because it's political speech.
Yes, I posted this great video we had on YouTube about Biden's Alba, and I got banned from, I think it was Facebook, actually, for a while, because they thought I was posting political
You got put
stuff.
in Facebook jail.
Yep, I was put in jail for 3 days. It was
100%.
hilarious.
And so I think that totally
What's our next victim?
does it for that. Okay, so I'm going to give you some choices because these are complicated.
Yeah, just throw whatever.
The eye health one about the compounds, because it both was formulas for and how to make a compound and medicine making that's extraordinary and it's so expensive. So it's the macular degeneration talk. There was the amber and the succinic acid, the HOPO. And there was all kinds of things about that, like efficacy, is it accessible?
Let's start with
safety.
Yeah, let's start with David's formula.
Okay.
And so
Do you want me to tell you more, or do you want to just?
Well, I think I remember a lot of it. There was some age-related macular degeneration. It was more, they hadn't been diagnosed with macular degeneration. And there was a family history. It was a woman, and women have a higher rate of macular degeneration. And so I'll start with macular degeneration is the macula is kind of the back of the eye. And that is a fatty tissue layer of the eye that is at risk of breaking down that can lead to blindness. And there's generally two types of it, what's called dry and wet. The dry macular degeneration is also referred to as age-related macular degeneration. Risk factor, women, I don't understand why women are like higher risk factor for everything, but whatever it is. And smokers and diabetes, actually, all increase the risk of macular degeneration. I'm sure there's some other issues as well. I've actually had really good success in treating that a lot in the future. Western medicine kind of delays the progression of it, but ultimately it leads to blindness. The wet macular degeneration is the one where they start injecting your eye with all kinds of interesting stuff, which I will say creeps me out. Diet has an impact on all of this, as well as stress. And there's a number of different things that you can do to, I would say, especially if you're just like, oh, there's a family history, I'm generally a healthy person. There's definitely some supplements, some herbs, and interestingly, acupressure points that we can utilize that can be really effective. And a lot of these I use not only as prevention, but I use in treatment as well. I would say I always use in treatment. and I'm going to get to David Winston's formula for sure here in a second. But in general, the supplement lutein and zeaxanthin are a must. And I would argue that whatever the bottle dosage is, double it.
Okay, so one of the things that is coming up is it did show up in a genetic profile for her, like as if it's turned on. And so she wants to be majorly proactive.
Oh, totally. And so it would be totally appropriate as prevention. I would just make sure your supplement it has the lutein and zeaxanthin in it. Maybe as you don't have symptoms of it yet, you don't need to double it.
Okay, so let me comment on like what the real thing was it was fine. She felt safe in what she was doing, and it felt like it was good. But it's just so hard to keep up with it that it's rather expensive.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just, if we say the word macular degeneration, I want to make sure we discuss it for everybody, not just one person.
And obviously, I have medicine-making things to say about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the lutein and zeaxanthin is really important. Maintaining healthy blood sugar is really important. Your dark green leafies have a huge role in it, and there's it's funny, I was just researching something recently about the dark green leafies that I'm going to say I didn't know. There are many good components to dark green leafy vegetables in general, and I would say any of your cruciferous vegetables, any of these, there is an increased benefit to chopping them up and letting them sit for up to an hour. Chemical change happens with those that is similar to what happens with garlic, in that the sulfur compounds that are in there will go through a transition to be more available to the body. And so chopping your greens up first and then cooking them, and those sulfur compounds, once they go through that process, aren't destroyed by cooking. So, if you ever notice that when you steam some broccoli, the water smells kind of weird and sulfury, that's the sulfur compounds. That's the stuff we want. So chopping your vegetables 30 minutes to an hour prior to, letting them sit out before you throw them in the pot to stir fry, cook them down, whatever, can be really helpful. So those dark green leafies are to your benefit. If you're like, I don't want to take another stupid supplement, most of your lutein and zeaxanthin is extracted from calendula, marigolds, or juhua, chrysanthemum. Yeah, and so it's funny that like the chrysanthemum in particular is the Chinese herb juhua. We say guides to the eye, and that is a source, a natural source for lutein and zeaxanthin. And there's a number of different supplements that contain a lot of the nutrients that we might suggest for that. An easy one to find, I like Jarrow, even though they're not perfect, they're easily accessible if you're, not near fancy health food stores. They have a vision optimizer that's got a nice group of minerals and vitamins that are put together. Yes, ma'am.
There's a question about what you were saying about the chopped greens.
Yeah.
Is it okay to not cook them and to put them in pesto, or is it?
That's a great question.
Is it needed cooked?
It's going to take us down a slightly different pathway, but I'll come back quickly, I promise. I would, with cruciferous vegetables in particular, that's your dark green leafies, anything that the flower on it is across the the newer name for that now. I don't know if they actually use cruciferous now. They're just brassicas. So all of your brassicas, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. Eaten raw have the potential over time to be a thyroid disruptor. And so as people overeat raw dark green leafy cruciferous vegetables or juice the dark green cruciferous vegetables, if they're doing that consistently, usually 6 months to a year, I watch the thyroid start to tank.
I have a question about that for you. And if you don't want to go down this rabbit hole, I understand. Do you feel like us having it soak and macerate in like an oil or a vinegar, it like for a certain amount of time, is enough cooking in quotation marks?
No,
Bob doesn't think that's enough.
no. I like if you did it in a vinegar and let it macerate and break down over a period of time. If you did a
But
ferment,
not like a day.
no. And I'm the first one to wolf down a kale salad. It is super yummy. It's, if it's the holiday parties and I'm dipping some cauliflower in some dip and eating it raw. Who cares? Seriously. But it's about doing that every day, and I know
If you're
way too.
juicing it, you get too much.
I know so many people who are doing cleanses and all this other stuff, and I know naturopaths and functional medicine docs who recommend it. And I'll tell a short story. I had a woman. She'd been diagnosed with breast cancer, very early stage, and she was already a super healthy person. And she did a double mastectomy because she just wanted to make sure there was no issue. She did all the supplements. She did the IV nutrition. She did everything perfect. She went through the whole thing gangbusters. And she went to first one functional medicine doc for support through the whole process. Then a second functional medicine doc, both of which I have a great deal of respect for. And then just to cover all of her bases, she went to go see the crazy herbalist. That would be me. And she showed me all of the protocols and everything else, and I think she didn't see me until after she'd finished with the oncologist. She'd worked primarily with the functional medicine docs and the oncologist, and then came to see me to make sure she was staying ahead of the curve. And I went through all of her blood work, I went through all of her supplements, the whole regimen that these two really well-respected, been in practice longer than me, functional medicine docs, and I went through, I was like, I have absolutely nothing to add to this. It would just start to be redundant and even more expensive.
So they were doing a good job.
They were doing a great job, and the woman was exercise and mental health. She had every base covered, except one of the functional medicine docs wanted her to juice kale every day.
Yeah.
She went, and so big old bunch of kale. It was just straight kale, and it was to just clean the liver out, this whole idea. And I was like, everything is perfect in here, except I do have an issue with this. And I'm concerned that 6 months to a year from now that your thyroid's going to tank. And she was like, yeah, great, thanks, bye-bye. And I never saw her again until 6 months later. She came back, she was like, I just got diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and I don't understand why. There's no family history. There's no other reason why I should have this. I've been doing everything right, but I remember you told me that. And I'm like, sorry, stop juicing.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't fix it. You have to go try to fix
it. It took, actually, I think it took me almost 2 years to get it.
Work
So,
to fix it.
yeah, there's a lot of work. So, I'm looking over here, Renee's snacking as we go here, and I'm like, ooh, parsley greens. Hey, that's not a brassica. And even if it was like a kale salad, I would totally snatch that off her plate, not think twice about it. It's about having those raw brassicas every single day. And so, yes, it will still get that sulfur compound transition into something usable, but you should cook your brassicas.
The other thing is in the juiced form, you get more than your body could process.
Without the
That's what I'm
insoluble
saying.
fiber.
That's
You
what
want
I'm
the
saying.
fiber.
Right.
Yeah, you want
It
the
should
fiber
never
in
be
that
juiced.
stuff. So, all right, back to I'm about to say mitral valve prolapse. That's not what we're talking about.
So
the macular degeneration. Sorry, I'm going to get us back.
So the question was really, not the question was really, but the add-on to this was, it was a solid extract. So she wanted to think about, like, what was the process of making that? Was it just a juice with a tincture? Like, how did that process
basically,
work?
the solid extract, it is David's, and David, I'm a huge fan of his products, Herbalist and Alchemist. He does a great job. He has some really unique methodology in how he processes and creates his tinctures in particular.
He believes in synergy and them being together.
Yeah, and so he works hard working at it from both a research and an energetic processing to put those together. And he wasn't the first to do the extracts, but he really did do a good quality extraction for those extracts. And basically, it's concentrating them down.
Can I say something
Yeah,
about
go
this?
for it.
Because one of the comments was that there's not a lot said about it, like you don't hear other people talking about it, and that's because it's like grandma's medicine. She just don't know to use the word compound or extract. It's basically making like a syrup or a jelly or a jam out of your medicine. Like literally, it's just reducing it to a solid state So it's the decoction process that we talk about, but then reducing it down further, and you don't want to ruin it with heat. So it's all about that. And so that's why you don't hear about it, because people don't properly term it.
He does a low temperature extraction, blah, blah, blah,
and
blah,
that's
blah.
one of the only ones that he still tries to do himself, where the rest are done by a company.
Outside, yeah. And like, that's a good product. The anything that's in the vacuum blueberry family has those anthocyanins, which are why he's using blueberry. The blueberry is good for eye health. It guides to the eyes. But there's 1,000 different fruits that you can use for that. And it's not like that alone is guaranteed. It is a good anti-inflammatory, but I would say eat blueberries, eat bilberries. You're in North Carolina, you got no shortage of black raspberries there. Eat the heck out of those suckers too. And blueberries grow pretty good up there. So just start making that a part of your diet, along with those dark green leafies and some orange things like carrots. Start to incorporate all of those, and you'll have a nice healthy diet. But also, you don't need to buy a concentrated food product. And there's nothing wrong with that. You also would have the option of buying dried and powdered, and you would get a similar type of compound, so long as you're making sure that it was organic and cold processed.
And I do want to say, because one of the comments here, that, like, I'm making sure that it's accounted for, she said was an extract, just basically kind of what we were saying, a juice or a jam that had an alcohol tincture in it to make it shelf stable. In a way, yeah, like it is something that if I was to make, so Kristen in particular, because you've been with us in classes, if I was to make an elixir or an oxymel and reduce it to a state that could be eaten with a spoon, like you see, yeah, that's exactly what it would be. And so it's not withdrawing anything from it. So if you mush the berries like Bob was talking about up, nothing was ever taken out, so it wasn't strained.
Just fluid, water.
Yeah, just the fluid. So that way you're eating a tablespoon, but it really is like eating the whole berry container.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of the alcohol being in it at the end, like combining the tincture, the Insight tincture with a compound would be correct to make it shelf stable.
And I would say the tincture itself, and his stuff is expensive. It's a good product, good quality control standards, and he does spagyric processing to most of his herbs. So after it's tincture, they take the leftover herbs, and they put those in an oxygen-depleted high-temperature oven to pull out all the carbon, and it's left with the minerals, and those are added back into the tincture, so you're getting something closer to the whole herb in that alcohol extraction. But the reality is, there are many herbs and many formulas that would be appropriate for macular degeneration. And I would say getting something, if we're working on a focus on eye health and looking at what is a constitutional, like what's your overall imbalance, let's put those herbs together and make sure that there's a focused conversation on the eyes. And I'll add in there's a number, and I don't know if I can do this on screen appropriately, a few of the points, but if you Google acupuncture points around the eye, you'll find a number of very easy to find points around the eye that by massaging those gently, you can actually improve eye health and vision. And everybody I have, either for any eye condition, but specifically for macular degeneration, I always have them do this as a daily practice. And so I'll hit a few of the easy to find ones. At the corner of the eyebrows right here is urinary bladder 2, and there's like a little divot, a little foramen right there, and it's achy. It can also help clear sinuses. I think it's, Yu-Yao, right in the middle of the eyebrows, right on the orbital ridge. Ow, that one's tender. At the corners of the eyebrow, and then right at the corner of the eyes, this one is also for stress. And then we can do the same down towards the bottom. There's one here at the quarters, and then directly down is stomach 2. But just looking for acupuncture points around the eyes, and actually UB1 is right here. Doing about 30 seconds to a minute on each one of these little divots. If you miss the point, I promise you will not spontaneously combust. That just feels good. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can also, it's a little bit harder to find, and I'm not going to show off my legs on camera, but look for gallbladder 37, which is on the lateral side of both legs, just above the ankle, a little ways above
There's
the
a
ankle.
question that's relevant to this
Yep.
that's quite extensive. And so one of the questions was, because it was eye, we were talking about eye.
Yep.
Eye pressure that comes and goes, that is kind of at the top part of the eyeball, like kind of in the back. Could we imply that's a blood sugar issue since it comes and goes? Do you know anything about that? And then anything to ease threads or floaters that perceive to move at the same time?
No, that's great. So there's
That
a
was
couple.
Owen, who signs on all the time.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of possibilities to that. I'm going to start with the floaters first, because that's the easiest one. So floaters, it's like literally, it feels like, oh, I got dust on my eyes, and you want to wipe it off. I'm going to revert back to Chinese medicine on this one, just because it explains it so well. We have some weird correspondences in Chinese medicine. So when we talk about a spleen or a liver, we don't mean the real one. We mean this energetic idea of one. And so specifically the liver, we associate that with the menses for women. We see its relationship to stress, depression, irritability, anger, and it is reflected in the eye. And so oftentimes when we're looking at eye health in general, we look to the health of the eye. And a specific symptom, as we see, I'm going to say there's two things that I see the floaters having a relationship. But the most common one is an increase in stress. And it's either we have more stress than we did before, or our ability to handle the stress has been altered some way. So like if you used to use exercise as your way to help with what we would call qi stagnation, liver qi stagnation, and for some reason you can't exercise, your stress level is the same, but your ability to handle the stress has changed because of a lack of exercise. The other one is dehydration. Drink some more water.
Yeah, but let me ask you, because that comment of dehydration, drink so much more water, wouldn't that deal?
Also, we can deal with stress.
Wouldn't that deal with stress, blood pressure, and blood sugar?
Potentially.
You know,
and then the pain that you described, kind of on the upper portion or the back of the eye.
coming and going.
Yeah, and certainly we could. Eye pain can be related to stress. That idea of liver qi
Blood
stagnation.
sugar, yeah.
I would argue that should get checked out. That can be any number of different issues, because it could be things like glaucoma, a change in the eye pressure. It could be, that's actually can be a symptom of hypertension. So
That's why I said,
it
yeah,
can be a
let's talk
symptom
about
of high blood sugar. So definitely, like, I am not anti-MD or eye doc or any other kind of doc for that matter. I particularly like their tests. I don't feel qualified to look at somebody, get the, not the otoscope, but to look at somebody's eye or ear and to be able to do as good a job as a GP or an MD would do. So I tend to like people to go and see the regular eye doctor and ear doctors and MDs and gynecologists and so forth, to look and do those general screenings and do blood work, because that's more information. And then we can make a good decision as to what's the best practices, what's the best, most effective and safest approach. And that may be herbs, it could be acupuncture, it could be diet and lifestyle, it could be quit your job, and it may be medications or surgeries. It just kind of depends on where everybody is in their life and what they're capable or willing to do. So yeah, that's one that I would say, like, no, you're not supposed to have eye pain. Get that one checked out. And I would start with just an eye doc. They can take your blood pressure as well as the next one, and kind of take a look at what's going on prior to. Is it blood sugar drop, yummy snacks that may be sugar or carbohydrate rich, or are they happening after a really stressful event? So it's important to kind of explore that. But having those floaters kind of happening in conjunction, I'm going to say that there's probably an increase in stress or that idea of liver qi stagnation that's going on. And I'm going to say something just weird because we almost had the opportunity to prove it. Isn't Chinese medicine cute? And the novelty of this idea that somehow our liver health is related to our eye health. I grew up down in the Bahamas, and a lot of my understanding of medicine, particularly that tropical medicine, comes from my time down in the Bahamas. And down there, we eat the whole fish. We eat about the only thing we skip is the scales, I think. And so head-on fish was very classically done, and the head is considered one of the best parts of the fish. It's where the fat in the fish is. So things like the lips, the tongue, the cheeks are all very fatty. And even the bolder of us tend to eat the eyes. And so there's actually a hard, the eyeball itself. But as it gets cooked, the materials in there, if you eat that, it actually tastes like liver. And which I find a fascinating aspect, that not only is there this cool, energetic correspondence, literally there is something in there that we see creates that unique and same taste palette that your actual liver eating that tastes like in the eye. All right, what else you got? Sorry, I rambled on about the
No, that's
the
great.
stuff.
And I'm just reminding everybody that I am moderating, so if there's questions that come up like that while we're talking, feel free to throw it in there, and I'll give you a like, just say that I read it and try to fit it in.
Yeah, I was going to say, y'all are being nice to Renee tonight, because usually she's banging away.
Typing crazy. Okay, so we have several to go through. You can choose. The resin one is an interesting conversation and why. So let me.
And I forget what the
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
are.
Let me tell you. Well, I didn't tell you all of it. So it was so you may not know this practice. That's why I said I'm probably going to have more to say about this. There's a very indigenous practice that it's very normal for infant babies, like out of the womb one day, to get resin beads, and they go onto their neck immediately and onto their wrist, and those are their teething beads, and to heal them and to grow them up strong is the amber beads.
Yeah.
And so that's caught on in mainstream society, and so absolutely that's a thing now, and you can get them out. And so there's several questions around that. So a relative had asked her, hey, do you know anything about this? And so of course she went down the rabbit hole of what it was, figured out it was a Chinese medicine. And so the first comment was, anything do you have to say about the Chinese medicine of Hopo? Then the next thing was, do we really think it's even actually accessible to get medicine from it, because it is a resin, but some of the arguments about baby's mouth being on it was enough. Some of the arguments are that it just warming on the body is enough to get the medicine from it. And then a third facet of the efficacy of it in the aspect of it comes out of the ground on backs of slaves type of thing, and we kill trees for it now, instead of it just be naturally a thing that was a wonderful thing and then passed down, which is normally how it happens. So my teething bracelet would go to my children.
So there's interesting, because the Chinese will kind of tie into that.
Okay.
Hupo, Hupo, is the Chinese herb amber, which is more, and amber is unique because that's actually a petrified tree resin, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah.
And that's where we find the DNA of a mosquito, dinosaurs. Oh, we can do the whole whatever that movie was.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, Jurassic Park. There we go. So we use it. It's not one I use regularly. It's for calming Shen and to stop seizures.
Which would be like a crying baby.
So that's where I was going to go with it. So this idea that we're putting that particular resin on babies for them to either get some microabsorption or sucking on it would actually make for a lovely child that's maybe just slightly calmer than the average baby. So that's like right on, super smart. But more importantly, like, there are many resins, not necessarily petrified resins, that are used for medicine, and whether it's frankincense and myrrh, rushang moyao, dragon's blood, chujie, and there are many other ones that are used traditionally all around the world. Maple syrup is a tree resin. It's great on pancakes, yay! But it's funny, we use birch, but birch syrup, the sap of a birch, we use sweet gum, lulutong. Is the sweet gum tree that is used in anywhere sweet gums grow, that is used for medicine. And so the resins of all of these trees are frequently harvested for everything from spiritual uses to physical medicine, internal and external. But there's huge problems in frankincense and myrrh, because of its spiritual use as well as physical medicine. we now find that those, I believe it's the frankincense in particular, are threatened as we see the expansion of the desert in the Middle East as primary growing region and the over-harvesting because it's such an expensive herb. The trees are dying, and they're too long to propagate. It takes hundreds of years to propagate one to its full size. So we may not have access to frankincense, or it will be so cost prohibitive, kind of like the dragon's blood, the Yujie. We can't get it anymore. It was harvested for everything from the Stradivarius violins to the trees themselves to spiritual and physical medicine and Chinese medicine. I think it's up to something like $300 a pound for the tree resin right now.
I have a lot to say about this, only if you want me to.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll finish my thoughts.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
And I think part of that question too was a particular chemical.
Succinic.
Or
succinic.
And so, as a general rule, I'm not a fan of either standardized extracts, and opinions vary greatly on this, but even more so extracting an individual chemical out, because then we start to, although it may have stronger action, we also get stronger adverse events. And so we're more likely to create problems when we start to look at a single chemical in a resin or a plant or anything else that has thousands and thousands of different chemicals. In the same way, I don't even like juicing because we've just lost the insoluble fiber. And so we have to be cautious when we start isolating. There's nothing wrong with doing research on it or saying, ooh, there's this really unique chemical in here that warrants exploration or understanding. But it's always funny when we start to look at marker compounds and we advertise them as active constituents, time and time again, it's been shown to be a failure. And so I like plant medicine, I like resin medicine, I like food medicine, and we can certainly try to find things that have a particular ratio or something that may have value, but not a fan of extracting single chemicals out and utilizing them as a drug.
And that was important because that only technically comes measured from the Baltic one, which is why there's such an issue.
It's great marketing.
And so it is. And so this is my general comment about this, as far as like, hey, let's get a little bit of history on this. That Hopo's been around for a super long time in the Chinese history, and it's in more than 50 formulas. Hopo, sorry, I'm saying who, yeah. Hopo. And so it's in more than...
Because there is a Hopo.
50, that's so funny.
Yeah, there's Hopo is the magnolia bark.
Okay, so it's
H-O-U.
Which is funny, because it's the magnolia bark that would have resins inside of it.
Yeah, but Hupo is the amber.
Well, for what I'm about to say, it's important that that's magnolia bark, and that it's even close, and you brought that up. So Hippocrates wrote about all the cultures that use all resins, and they all come from elder trees that have been petrified, and they all say the same kind of things. It's like for trauma, it's for people who are out of their mind.
Yeah, everything from physical to emotional, spiritual trauma.
So Hippocrates writes about the Egyptians and all the resins they used, and they name the Baltic one, but they name a bunch of other ones too. So it goes down the line of what you're saying, that the elders of the community, which were the trees, and then living their life gave way to trauma medicine. And we teach about like all the resins being for traumas, whether that's physical or whatever.
Even the dragon's blood and things
100%.
like that. Shujie
and so it looks like any
sweet gum, all of those.
100%.
Yeah.
So it looks like anywhere that people had their resins for trauma, they made their baby things out of those resins.
It's rough being a baby.
Right. Well, they came, remember, from the Chinese perspective, like it came from death to life and had to seed a human into a being, and that's an event that happens. And of course the mom was in trauma, and then it gets passed down. So my point was, if you see cultures do something for thousands of years, all cultures from all areas, and it's similar and it never changes, one, you can trust that. But then the secondary side of that question is the matter of the efficacy of it and whether or not it should be not practiced because out of the grounds on backs of slaves. Well, not if you get the one that's yours. It kind of, you were saying, if we're getting only Palo Santo or only Baltic or only frankincense and myrrh.
And let's there's a couple of aspects. Sometimes it's like, well, they say that it did all this amazing stuff, but sometimes it doesn't. If
Well, what it was back then is probably not what
The,
it is now.
one of the shortcuts that we find happens in a lot of herbal medicine is traditionally, there's a great example, right? It was my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and Renee scored like the coolest plant ever. She found uno de gato, the cat's claw, like the real one, not the Home Depot one, and I don't even want to know where she got it from. And I was doing some research because I was like, "Ooh, how do we grow this? How do we grow this here in Florida?" And it was very specific that you cannot harvest it until after 8 years. And so, what if I did? What if I
use that? Yeah.
Yeah, and so we see that with so many plants. We see that with the magnolia. We see that with kava. We see that with so many of our plants that
Our Palo.
you said the word. The Palo Santo.
Linde Vitae.
And so there is a concentration of unique nutrients, energy, however we want to express it. And so when money is involved, sometimes we make shortcuts. And we find now that there's been a loss of natural sources of cat's claw down in South America, and there's been an over-harvesting. And as I was researching how to grow this plant, I saw that there was a larger demand than there was availability. The crops had not caught up for the commercially grown ones, and so people were shortcutting it as fast as they could. And I didn't even think about it. And ginseng, we see the older the ginseng, the more powerful and effective it is. So if we are reading something like Hippocrates 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and they were harvesting from trees that were already 500 or 1,000 years old, and we've killed them all.
But the other thing is we missed the tradition of the fact that it would be passed to the baby. There wouldn't be a new one made. Mine would go to my firstborn.
So we have to look at quality control. We have to look at sustainability and the ethical harvesting. And I would say, and I think Renee said it as well, and it would have been, you may have missed it, what's your local tree that we'd use? If we're harvesting from the Middle East, well, I promise you there was somebody here, some traditional culture that did it here, and it was probably sweet gum. When we look at the Cherokee and all the other native tribes here, Cherokee, the sweet gum was their one of their primary trauma medicines, and there were others, and we can extract a sap from that and make a resin. So, why don't we? Because it's not commercially viable because there's so many sweet gum trees. It is so special and unique and has some unique mystique around it for some of these others. And so we forget to look in our own backyard sometimes for our superfoods and super medicines. It is more cost effective and more sustainable. Boy, and the ability to talk is failing me. I must need some sweet gum. The other thing that's really challenging when we look at resins in general is to put them in a viable form that we can consume them. So it's great if it's a little hard bead that we drill a little hole in, we string it, and the baby has it, and it's a little teething ring. It's so many different uses. But more often we're trying to ingest them. And so I made the mistake very early in my career of trying to do a decoction of a resin, and I've thrown out many a pan because it gets just soft enough to stick to the bottom and burn. And so usually we have to use a very high alcohol, something above 150, in order to put it into solution. Or if we're going to consume it, which is a way to do it, usually we'll freeze it in order to powder it. We do have some tricks that we do. We're going to learn that in medicine making class next week, where we actually will start to powder other just regular woody herbs and then slowly drop in our dried resins, and it kind of sticks onto the other ones and allows us to do that. Those are the biggies. That's enough on resins.
Yeah, I think you did.
We got to get other questions.
And was the point of Hippocrates writing about all the other traditions was exactly what you said. Like just saying, no, use the one that's in your area.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was great. Thank you, Bob. Okay, so the next one, we can go through a few of them.
Yeah, right.
Do we want to talk about the animal class and reptiles and five?
Yeah, I forget what the question was.
So it was kind of like, hey, this is, you helped us with the dog, with the Solomon seal. In class, are we going to talk about, do we talk about doctoring reptiles?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So,
and I said send more questions about that, but yes.
Yeah, and so it's so funny. It's really odd. We're getting in 2 weeks, I think, we're doing the animal class. So we treat all critters. We're not limited to two-leggeds.
And I think that's rare. I think we're special
Yeah,
that way, that we'll
yeah.
just be like, okay,
And-
let's try.
And what's one of the fun things about energetics, and I mentioned that earlier, this idea of how we look at disease, we look at herbs, we look at food, we look at prescription medicines through this lens of energetics, of hot, cold, wet, dry, deficient, excess, tense, and lax.
So we can.
And it makes it easier. And so when we look at critters, and you know, it is not limited to humans. It's not limited to mammals. We can incorporate this herbs based on the energetics of the critter. And there are herbs that we can't use with certain critters, but that's a way longer conversation or a class, a weekend intensive. But even when we look at the list of things we're not supposed to do, sometimes we can do it anyway, the same we do with humans.
Good formulation.
And so the class that we teach on that is really an exploration in the understanding how to recognize the energetics in critters, because we can't ask questions. We can ask, pet owners and so forth, but sometimes we have to do more on observational signs and symptoms, and every critter is unique. And the other part that's a real challenge, how do we dose for critters? And how do we get them in them? I can hold my nose and drink the nasty swill, and we always joke that dogs are easy, they lick their own butts.
I feel like I'm an expert at it now.
But when we start to talk about horses or cats or birds or reptiles, how do we address their unique issues? And it's really funny. I have had Renee and I have separate from each other, have had really unique experiences working with animals, and sometimes exotic animals. And although we've been advertising the class and stuff, we haven't talked about it a lot. And all of a sudden we had 4 people out of the blue contact us about animal stuff. Mm-hmm. And one was a young kid, I believe he was a freshman in high school, who was in a veterinary magnet school here locally and was getting worried about the heavy use of medications and chemicals, and he was considering a career in veterinary medicine, and was like, I kind of don't want all of those chemicals. I don't want to give, he was a little too well educated. I had a veterinarian that, I forget if he had a specialty or not, but a veterinarian who we met at International Herb Symposium. I was teaching up there, and I forget what this...
He was like a crazy cat man, he said.
Yeah, I don't know if you're online or not. And he had worked with somebody I had worked as a formulator for to create a dog and cat line of some very unique products that we've had good success. I was just reminded there was a student of ours from years past and a nurse who had gone on to look at holistic nursing as a career, and she came by to interview me for a paper she was working on for her bachelor's degree. And she was like, do you remember, and it was 10, 12, 15 years ago, who knows, said, you helped my dog with heartworms that he'd been diagnosed, but she didn't want to go through all of that, and so we had an herbal formula I'd made for something else.
Several times.
Yeah, and the doctor said, we must have not diagnosed your dog with heartworms correctly because you can't make them go away, and we did. And also I got to create a herbal line for horses, particularly competitive horses. And so, do we talk about the other ones? Yes. We focus on dogs and cats because they're so common. But we've had bearded lizards, we've snakes, chickens. We worked on you've had giraffes.
Llamas, giraffes, elephants, alligators, fish.
There's been some wild cats I've worked with.
Big cats.
So the reality is we change the dosing a little bit. We have to get creative with our
metabolism, their personalities.
Kristen, I think you had the main question with all of that. It still comes down to those energetics, and we'll definitely, we don't have the acupressure points for snakes. I don't know them. But dogs and cats and mammals, they're all pretty similar, and you could probably figure out birds, but I'm not quite sure.
So one of her comments was, two comments that go with that was the daughter who we're talking
Yeah,
about has been rescuing neglected bearded dragons. And so that's what she
We're going to have to talk about the
we have a specialty with that one.
Yeah,
in particular.
one of my students in the past had a bearded dragon who had PTSD, and
No joke.
Yeah, and like it had its toes bitten off by accident, like at birth. It was horrid, and didn't play with all the other ones, and kind of like
It
had
was sad.
cowered in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suggested, not just because it was a good, but specifically because it was a reptile, to use moxibustion, which is the indirect warming of specific acupuncture points with mugwort. And that student now works for us
Yes.
as an herbalist.
She's amazing.
But she was raising bearded dragons, and so she, I hate to say it, rolled up a little joint with a little bit of moxa and brought the lizard over and hit the corresponding spots that we might use for PTSD on the due meridian on the spine, and I think it was like due 4 and due 14, and maybe there was a few back shoe points that we came up with that would be easy to find. And after a single treatment, that lizard perked up, started playing with others, ate vigorously after that, and it was literally a single treatment with a little bit of mugwort rolled up on those specific points. And so, like, the limitation is only our own creativity on how we go about these things. And the critter is, yes, I haven't worked on single cell animals yet. Give me time.
Kind of parasites. And I've done the same kind of thing with Rescue Remedy with the bearded who is stressed.
Yeah, Rescue Remedy. Yeah, so internal and external use of herbs is amazing. And critters, it's so funny. The critters in some way are easier because they don't have all the emotional crap that us as humans carry around, and their diets
They tend to let it go.
tend to be, with a little bit of gentle prodding in the right direction, they respond so much better.
Yeah, we hold on to stuff.
And they don't disbelieve that they can be well.
Yep.
And so doubt is a bad illness. They're usually easier. They respond great to homeopathic and flower essences, better than humans do even. And a lot of our spiritual energetic aspects that we put with our herbal medicine, when we can make those observations and get proper histories, we can get some really cool results. I seem to remember we had one of our students, had more PhDs than I can count, had a cat that had this chronic cough. And it was upon questioning her a little bit, we found out that there was a recent death of its litter mate. And there was something else, like that she had brought in another cat, I think. But there was a lot of loss in the family unit, and that pack order we normally associate it with dogs, but it's with every animal. There's a pack order, a pecking order, if you will, and we associate the act of grief and grieving with the lung. And so I was like, "Oh, your cat's just grieving," and we asked the right questions to come down to that. And I think we gave some reishi mushroom and the flower essence.
We treated that cat like we treated the mom that was upset. We gave him the same formula, basically.
And I want to say within a week the cough resolved.
Yeah, no, I mean, it worked. And then what happened is there was another trauma because they're all staggered in age, and she had the same reaction and did it again. She's been successful for years, is my point, with that circumstance. And so, it was very successful.
And Zachary, if you're on there, she was a crazy cat lady too.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, so Kristen also pointed out, because I didn't know if you wanted to suggest this, how grateful she was for the suggestion to purchase the book.
Oh, yeah. And so we'll post it maybe... we'll post it on the Facebook page, but I'll also post it when I upload it to YouTube. I'll post a link to the book, The 4 Paws, 5 Directions. And I'm going to say, buy it through our website so we get our 5 cents. Our 5 cents for putting it out there. The 4 Paws, 5 Directions, it's a cute thing if you know Chinese medicine. It is very much made for it's very much made for the general public. But as a practitioner, it is my go-to. I have all the books. I have the ones the veterinarians do when they go to specialized acupuncture training in Gainesville. I got all of those books too. I still go back to the 4 Paws, 5 Directions. It is so user-friendly. They utilize both Western and Chinese herbs and formulas. They utilize acupressure. and they do a very simple way to look at an understanding of the energetics of your critter. And the focus is dogs and cats. You won't get, they have charts for those two animals, but they don't have them for dogs, or for horses or reptiles or anything like that. But it is I won't say it's the only book we teach out of for that weekend,
usable.
but it is the primary book we'll use for that weekend intensive. We reference it a lot because we do go over acupressure and combinations and things like that.
Well, okay.
All right, give me some more.
I can give you some more. Plus, Owen threw up another one that was just crazy good. And so
throw it at me.
Okay, so I'm going to
We
go
appreciate
to the
it. He
ones we
keeps
had
showing up
before
too.
that.
Okay.
So we have a questioning about ghost pipe. We have the fire cider in the sun.
Let's
herbs
talk
in the freezer.
Yeah, let's talk
storage.
about ghost pipe.
Okay,
real
so let me
fast.
go through that a little bit. So, had an opportunity to walk into an herb called ghost pipe, is what we're talking about, a plant called ghost pipe. And she said, was immediately struck by it, as most people are.
Yeah.
And then went on
It's
this whole
unique.
thing of trying to discover what's going on here. Read something at CP's book, Corey's book,
Corey Pine-
about it,
Corey
and
Pine Chain.
realized that maybe she shouldn't be using it. Like, it's like a kind of weird and at risk, and we don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
And then went to using it as a
Yeah, I remember.
flower essence,
Yeah.
which I'm sure probably came from Sovereignty Herbs, from Erica Gatlin or
Yeah,
somebody.
I think so.
And wanted to know, like, she tends to use it when she's feeling really very sad, and wanted to know about, like, our thoughts about it. Should we use it? Do we have it? Is successful for PTSD? Like, all the things we hear about. And then the other thing that kind of goes with that was wanting to know, felt like it was applicable when she was on land that she thought was sad, like held the trauma of it, that she was feeling that. Would we use it to heal other things too? And you know, obviously my answer is so go for
so
it.
ghost pipe is a really, if you're unfamiliar with it, I encourage you to Google it. Just because the pictures of it is
Nice.
and it's
She said yes, it's Erica, Sovereignty.
yeah, it's funny.
That's the
good
best
call.
place to get it.
Yeah, and one of the few places to get it other than Corey Pine.
She's so
Yeah.
authentic in her.
Yeah. So it is a fascinating plant, and up to now cannot be commercially propagated.
Although we do have spores.
Yeah, but
gonna try.
we're going to try. But my understanding is that no one has been successful, at least not at a commercially viable amount.
No, not commercially.
Yeah, and so all of the anytime you see it for sale, it has been wild harvested, and it is not even well understood as to how it propagates or why. We've been lucky on a number of occasions. We found some patches, always when it seemed appropriate, that we've managed to harvest some that we use only at the clinic, and we use it so sparingly. And so it brings up some questions about safe harvesting practices in general. That the idea that we always leave, depending on who you ask, never take more than a third of anything, and I would say I prefer taking less, especially in the case of ghost pipe. If I'm harvesting another plant, there's usually seeds that I can throw out on the ground. So if I'm harvesting, I take any seeds that are viable and I'll spread those around.
Spread pollen. Or
it will shake
brush
the
up
pollen.
against them,
There's lots of ways that if we're harvesting a third of it, that we can help to spread and propagate that product. In the case of ghost pipe, what you take is all there's no way that we can encourage its propagation. So we've been careful the couple times we have harvested it to take a very small amount, just enough to do, I think we've done like a gallon tincture max. Sometimes it's a quart, sometimes it's a gallon
I was
tincture.
going to say, I don't think we've...
Maybe it was a
only
quart.
did quarts.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's...
And we still have it because we
Yeah,
only use it for certain things.
The last time we harvested it was pre-COVID, because we get it when we go up to the Medicines of the Earth conference, and sometimes when we go for the American Herbalist Guild conference. So we haven't had those in a year and a half, and we don't have we might have to make a special trip because I know we're down to our last little bit. But it is, and I think Corey Pine and David Winston, a few other people talk about it. And it's not a pain-killing herb. It's not a hallucinogenic herb, and I've seen it put out as both of those. one of the ways we talk about it is it creates a separation from your pain. So for when people are saying, I got a 10 out of 10 for pain, and it's chronic, it's going on for years and years and years, and it's people kill themselves. They commit suicide because they can't stand the pain anymore. The opiates don't do it anymore. They, the tolerance and all of that. And so literally that idea that the pain is so intense, that's so overwhelming, the ability to step back outside, almost outside of your body or your pain body, allows you a breath, and it allows you a moment. That's what we think of for Ghost Pipe. And I love the idea that, there is emotional trauma and emotional pain, not just physical pain, and it can help with that. And hell yeah, I think it could be used to heal land that has been traumatized by anything from horrible things that have happened on the land or horrible things that we have done to the land. And, like a little Ghost Pipe on a Superfund site wouldn't be wrong. Yeah.
I do want to say, to reiterate what you were saying about the usage of it, David was really persistent. So when that happened to us and we found it the first time, of course I ran and said, what do I do? Like, am I allowed to do this? Like, I wanted to get permission from David Winston, who would have been our indigenous or native medicine person for there. And one of the things he did say to me, and he has said to me post that, is it works when it works and then it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And so stop. So it's not for everything. Like, if it works, and that's the medicine for that person. It's not for everybody in every situation, and you shouldn't keep trying to use it. Like, if they really are protective of it, is my point, and that immediately if it's going to work or not.
I was going to say, I've probably used it 10 times in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And we recently had a case, one of the other practitioners at the clinic had a woman, she was a soldier, and had PTSD, I forget what it was, but horrible, intractable pain and was avoiding the opiate drugs. And she was like, you got any suggestions? And I was like, it's not Chinese, but like, I explained to her about the Ghost Pipe. She's like, all right, I'm going to try it. And I was like, you can put it in the formula, whatever. She's like, and so what she did, she was like, no, I want to know if it works. And so she only gave her the Ghost Pipe. And 1 week later on the follow-up appointment, the only thing she had changed was the same acupuncture points, same treatment. She continued with the same diet. She came in practically skipping with this big smile on her face. And it was like, I don't know why, but I feel different. I feel hopeful. And
she didn't even realize.
Yeah, and she didn't she didn't even know. And I was like, that's what we hope to acquire with the Ghost Pipe. And that's the magic. And just dumb luck, we happened to pull out the right combination that time.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I think the times that it has not worked for me is when I mix it with other stuff. It's worked best when it is in isolation, and I rarely say that. I'm always about formula. In the case of the Ghost Pipe, it's about clearing space for everything else, and so to cloud it with other herbs, I think, is sometimes a mistake. That when you do use it for that extreme, that it should be that quiet, silent sentry.
And I feel like that's kind of what David was trying to say to me. Like, this is what it is, and then it's not if it's not, and then like make sure it's specific. So that's a good way to articulate that.
Yeah. And I found it, like, it's funny, I didn't know what it was when I was a kid, but I remember finding it as a child.
Lucky you.
And I've even seen it in Florida on rare occasions.
Well, when I was looking up how to grow it, they said it is here.
Yeah. It's further up north more commonly, but even there, I would call it rare.
Yeah, I agree. It's very rare. You're lucky if you see it. It's calling to you for some reason.
Yep.
For sure.
All right. What else you got?
Okay, so are we at the question about the fire cider? And the more important thing is the different suns. Different environments. And that went with some herb storage questions second.
I'll wrap those all up into one package. So there's, one of the things that we teach in like, Renee is without a doubt a master medicine maker, an award-winning medicine maker. I play with it a little bit, but one of the things we talk about is the intention we put into making our medicine. It's funny. we've had an apothecary manager, folks making our medicine for us. And Jen Carey used to work for me when she first graduated and when I was first in practice. And she really had a specialty on fertility and things like that. And if you were in a bad mood, you weren't allowed to make her medicine.
Yeah.
And even more so, she was like, every herb, when you pick that herb up out of the jar, you go, make babies, make babies, make babies.
You have to say why. Because she's specialized.
Yeah, they said that.
Oh, okay. Because otherwise that's just weird.
And so intention matters. And so part of that intention is, what is your intent? Why did you choose a place to put your medicine? And I would take that, and so the question was like, does it matter? I can put it out on my pool deck versus in a potted plant versus out in the middle of nature, and using that idea of the sun to help infuse. And if all us good tropical folks here, we love us some sun tea, and sun tea tastes different from other types of tea. And so a solar infusion or a lunar infusion has a different intention with it. And I would argue, it's funny, in our 101, in our beginning class, our very first exposure of students to herbalism, to us, we have a half acre here at the school, and we have them go out and say, if you're going to do an overnight infusion out there, you throw your herbs in there, you throw some water in there, you go, where should we put it? I was like, wherever you think you should put it. And a lot of people, it's really interesting, the not knowing botany, not knowing we don't have the plants labeled yet. We're getting there. They choose the most unique plants to place their medicine under, and it's usually relevant.
Yes.
And so I would argue, in general, gravity has an impact. And
tides here.
And putting it on the earth, we talk about Panchamama. The Mother Earth has this power and intention that each one of those plants has the ability to somehow change the way it does. I don't think concrete does that. And so, yeah, you can put it on the thing. It doesn't matter. But I know you gave an example a while back with the flower essences. And so we're talking vibrational medicine. We talk homeopathy, we're vibrational medicine. There's two companies that make flower essences, and one of them still does the very traditional way that Bach did it, and the other one kind of got big, and they had to start going to some machines starting to process that stuff, and they were still doing the basic principles. They weren't like shortcutting a whole lot. But instead of doing it by hand and putting their personal intentions into that medicine, that you find that there's a dramatic difference between those medicines and their effectiveness. So, yeah, it's inconvenient, but choosing the place that you put your medicine, and whether that's fire cider or a tincture or an infusion, it makes a difference when we put thought and intention and our trust in the plants to do stuff. And so it's funny, I like playing in the dirt. I like planting. That is my stress relief, is pulling a weed or planting a plant or whatever. And so I'll literally, we'll go out, we'll drop $100 or more at some of our native plant nurseries and stuff around here, and I'm sitting there like, I hold the plant and I look around the yard. I was like, I don't have room for anything else. And I'll walk around until literally I go, this is where it goes. And the more I've learned to trust my intuition, or the plant's intuition, your choice, as where does this plant belong in the yard? Where is its family unit? Where will it sit in community? I don't check alkalinity. I don't look at, it's going to get afternoon sun and blah, blah. No, I'm going to walk around till the plant tells me that's where it belongs. And I don't know, our garden looks pretty darn good back there.
I want to say something real quick too, because you would poo-poo the pool deck in some cases thinking it wasn't close to nature, But if she's making medicine for the kids and the family, and the kids
maybe
are
that is where their energy is. That's true.
Running around playing while the medicine is brewing the next couple weeks.
So yeah, if
you
you went out into your Bidens and the bees, and you're like, it doesn't feel right, and you put it back on the pool deck next to the floaty things, then
put it in the giraffe.
Good call. Good call.
So my point is, there's a reason. Like everything's for something,
and it is about trusting yourself, and sometimes it is practicality too.
For sure.
And along those lines, how and where we store our medicine, and whether it's processed or unprocessed, whether it's put into some sort of a preservative like alcohol and vinegar or so forth. Yay, come to 101. We teach about all that crap.
So this question came up dramatically in 101 before you got there. They were asking me side questions, and that's probably why it came up.
Okay, yeah. So there's a couple ways we can think about our plants. It's funny, within the Chinese medica, plants that are older, Chenpi, which is tangerine peel, we pay big bucks for the old stuff. And so there are some medicines that improve with age, even after they're dried and
I never
picked.
thought of that.
And other ones, like things that are aromatic, that have volatile oils, those have a very short shelf life. And then things like roots and barks, especially when they're not full of volatile oils, really, they have a shelf life, but they last for a pretty long time. And so what we're looking at as they oxidize, their exposure to air, oxygen, or to light, which also causes it to break down, the more chopped up something is, the more of its surface areas that is exposed to air and light, the faster it will start to degrade and break down in its strength as well. And the more we can, I said light, air, and temperature.
Yeah.
And so those are the three things that degrade our stuff. So heat will also degrade it. Especially the heat definitely affects those things with volatile oils. It's dramatic how fast they will start to evaporate those into the air. So we can do things to protect them from light. We put them away from direct sunlight. We can put them in amber or somehow colored bottles, or we can just store them in a closet if you got to. But they're so pretty when they're out on a shelf. We can, so we protect them from light. We put them in sealed jars that protects them from oxygen. We don't chop them up any further than we have to. So if you're powdering all your herbs the second you get them, and then put them in a jar, all of that powder is going to get more exposure to oxygen. So I always say, don't process an herb until you need to. And then the question was, what about putting things in the refrigerator or the freezer? Things can still break down. Like everything that's in your freezer are not in suspended animation. They're breaking down dramatically slower. It's why after you left that steak in there for 2 years, it's freezer burned. It's actually broken down. It just isn't smelly. So you can extend your shelf life of all your plants, but especially those ones with the volatile oils, in a freezer or refrigerator, in a airtight bag, and away from the light, all of those things. So put it in the back of your fridge instead of the front of your fridge. If you've got like that special herb fridge that's out in the garage or something, take the light bulb out so it doesn't turn the light on every time you open the door to look at all your pretty herbs. So there are gradations of how long and how much you can preserve your stuff. But know that if you're starting with good quality herbs, hopefully you're using them, that you'll hopefully look at using your herbs up within 6 months as a general rule. If you're starting with good quality, you do some basic protecting it from light and heat, and you're not breaking it down any sooner than you have to, any plant you'll get a good 6 months out of. If you I'm not going to get this till next season, you can look at your fridge or your freezer to extend that life. And bark and roots, especially when they're fairly whole or sliced, will have a multi-year lifespan if you use some basic protection and they're not full of volatile oils.
When we had this come up in class just this weekend, one of the things I came up with as we went through it was, if it was in the vacuum sealed, because the food savers now everybody has.
Yeah, vacuum sealing is huge for preservation.
And so that
and
was
especially in like
the freezer.
when we get stuff from Star West, it's you can't see through the bag, and so it's sealed, it's vacuum packed
And it's light
oftentimes.
protected.
Yep.
And the other thing was me cautioning them against if they dried it themselves and there was any water left and they put it in the freezer, it would ruin it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it turned into mush.
Yeah, and so just making sure if it was
A little
a store-bought
hyper-drying.
thing, then yeah.
You should be good.
Yeah, we should be good for sure. The other thing I want to point out is that that Kristen says on here, it's not about what we were talking about, it was previously because there's a delay, that says, ha ha ha, I plant the same way, people think I'm crazy. That he just walks around and says, the plant told me to, I'm putting it here.
Sometimes you're wrong, but there's some other plant that didn't like that one, obviously, and decided to be mean.
Yeah,
All
so
right,
I
what
thought
else
that
we
was
got?
funny. And
We've
so
got
we
40, 50 minutes left.
Yeah, and we have several more that are coming in. I'm going to write them down. So this
Cool.
next one is one that Owen put in that was, it was like a general long conversation of, well, because usually he's very articulate.
He's got good questions usually.
Yeah, so it was clearing things out of the body, like the body's ability, is this even a thing? X-ray, extra radiation, that's just normal. Does it pass through the brain barrier? MRIs, CAT scans. Is there damage to the DNA, or is there something we can do to protect that in the mitochondria? Is there a pre-scan prep to that? Is there a post-scan prep?
Okay.
Even
Yeah,
anesthesia. You get what I'm saying?
So, it's funny. I've had my share of surgeries and x-rays and all of that. And sometimes Renee always makes fun that I'm super sensitive and all that. And in the same sense, I'm also a dumb boy. And I'll just bang my head against the wall and just keep walking.
You are tough.
And so when it comes to things like x-rays, and I don't think I've ever had a CAT scan or an MRI.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh gosh, I should be glowing.
Yeah, right. It doesn't seem to affect me, but I have seen a number of patients over the years that are dramatically affected by going through those and how can you not? You're going through magnetic resonance, you're putting magnetic energy through the body. It does stuff. And even x-rays, obviously it's radioactive. There is a limit. That's why they wear the lead vest and they go behind the wall when they juice you. And so some people are strongly affected and some aren't. But the reality is everybody's affected, just some of us feel it and some of us don't. There are a number of things that we can do, some in theory and there's some okay research out there. Probably the biggest thing to do is stay hydrated. And the hydration is going to allow for the body to do its normal. Water's protective. It keeps the cells healthy. It keeps the lymphatic system healthy. So as if there's cells being damaged, if there's waste being produced from this exposure to something, the body has the ability to get that out. So really just hydrating before, during, and after, I would say is important. There's two herbs, actually there's three things that I generally look at to be protective in particular, and so I would say pre and post can be useful for any kind of radioactive stuff. Iodine, when Fukushima happened, there was a run on iodine. You couldn't buy it. People were cranking up the prices. It was like $100 a bottle at some point because it was such a concern that there was a worldwide exposure to radiation from Fukushima. And so without a doubt, iodine has a protective effect, in particular for the thyroid. So we can, if about to be exposed, I would say pre and post, using iodine in reasonable dosages. We don't have to go crazy with it. So if that's an isolated chemical. It's literally on the periodic table. I would say eat seafoods and seaweed because they are higher in iodine. And that can be protective. So seaweeds in particular are thought to be protective. The other two that I use a lot is rosemary and reishi mushroom. Those are the two that I use pre and post and have some pretty good research to back those up.
I have a bit of a question about that because this came up with the reishi, made me think of it. What did you think about adding cordyceps to that as a restoration.
And cordyceps wouldn't be wrong, especially it's more moistening. We think of radiation as drying, it damages the skin and so forth. And I'm going to put a caveat into what I just said, too. And I have issues with what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's like the oncology radiologists will tell you not to do any herbs in general because, or supplements in particular, like vitamin C, because they're antioxidants and they're oxidizing you. They're trying to destroy everything there. So if you're doing an antioxidant, you're negating the process of going through all of that hassle to go through.
But afterwards, the restorative.
So yeah, I always say post,
for sure.
And so, but if you're going in for an X-ray, I'm like, no, we're not trying to kill anything. You're going in to see if you got a broken bone. If you're doing an MRI or a CAT scan, I think the use of antioxidants in general, because our fear is that by, especially an X-ray, and I would say CAT scan as well, we are oxidizing. It's low grade, but it's oxidizing and damaging tissues. So looking at your antioxidants, which is every vegetable under the sun, but the rosemary and reishi are thought to be specifically protective against radiation.
I want to add to this a little bit because my exposure to radiation is different than yours, and I've had to deal with this for another reason too. So I know this isn't exactly what they're talking about because they're talking about scans, but I've twice done a post 10 and 12 year, not for me, from someone else, anesthesia, like 10 years and 12 years, and had the smell of the anesthesia coming out of them. So, and it's with very normal things, like you were saying. The other thing was, I want everybody to realize that if you work with clients that are critically ill, everybody always tells me, because when I'm taking patients, it's usually cancer patients. So my teachers, like Jody, will say, clients in the state of Florida, my teacher, like Jody, Dr. Noe, will say my exposure to radiation just by seeing more radiated people,
because they came in glowing,
is higher.
Yeah.
That's enough that I need to do something to protect myself from it. So people don't quite understand how actually upsetting something like just a plain X-ray is. And so if you're in that realm, having hyperprotection and restorative, things that are restorative.
And I would say, as a general rule, I'm not a big detox guy, but when we look at the liver's break, so the liver isn't necessarily detoxifying so much as it's a two-stage breakdown of stuff. Some of which are utilized as nutrients, because the liver is important for that, and some of it is waste products, and it poops, or those go out through either the poop or the pee, and so we can do things that help in that process of the liver's two-stage breakdown of stuff. And I'll simplify it. There are many nutrients, all the nutrients, water, everything is important in that process. As a general rule, if you actually go and look at what all the detox packets are that are sold by the functional medicine docs, and then
they're like all water.
No, I mean, there's things that
diuretics.
There's a bunch of stuff people want to see. Like everybody wants to see cilantro. What a crock! Everybody wants to see turmeric, and there's nothing wrong with those.
But it's not doing anything.
It's B vitamins. And it's glutathione.
Well, one of the questions was about mitochondria and DNA, and you're right,
and
B vitamins making it work right.
So people put all kinds of other interesting things in, not to say that it's bad or wrong, but a lot of it I think is put in there because people want to see it. And they think it's better, it's a sales tool, you can find some obscure, useless research study to back it up.
I've literally heard herbalists say
water,
they're expecting it.
The glutathione and the B vitamins,
I'll take
and you're probably going to detox pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Break down those various things and allow your body to eliminate them appropriately. Yeah. And I'll add to that, like you could argue magnesium and all the vitamins and minerals. You can iodine, milk thistle, blah blah blah. So those are never wrong. And I would say not just milk thistle, all the thistles.
Yes, all the thistles.
But part of that is your body's ability to eliminate. So if you are peeing, if you're pooping, and
things
if
are
you're
moving,
sweating,
you're not stuck. If things are moving.
yeah, so more important if you're doing any of those and you're constipated, if you're not pooping at least once, 1 to 3 times a day in well-formed logs that don't float but sink, as long as you're doing that, your body is eliminating. If you're pooping, literally I've had people that poop once every week or two. Those people are toxic, and I don't care, their mere existence is toxic. If we're not successfully moving the bowels, if we're not peeing regularly, then we're unable to eliminate any of those toxins, and they have to come out somewhere, or they're going to start to damage cells, and that's when we start to see creepy things like cancer.
All right, you ready?
Yo.
Okay, so I actually have answers for this. If you say no,
I got answers for everything.
Yeah,
No,
if you haven't worked for this, I have answers for this. So Kristen wants to know: do you have any thoughts, or have you ever worked with Yomagi or Artemisia princeps, which is a Korean wormwood? And I do know, the one that's the Argin, like the ARG.
Mm-hmm.
That crosses back and forth. I do know that this goes hand in hand, like they treat it like Vulgaris, and they treat it like the ARG one. And so I do know a little about this from the Japanese standpoint, even though it's Korean wormwood.
I was going to say we use it for moxa.
Yep, 100%.
Specifically, and there's debates whether it's better, worse, the same. I'd say it's the same.
Is going to say
mine's the best.
Right, and so so she's using it. She's growing it to smudge. She wanted to know. So that makes sense. And so she wanted to know what you had to say about it.
Yes.
If you had anything.
I would say any of the artemisias can be used as smudge, but that one in particular, I would use it the same way as the mugwort Artemisia vulgaris. I would use it the same way.
So I want to tell you something about it that you might know this, that I think is horrifying. That in Korea and in Japan, they use it to make pancakes. They use it to make rice cakes. They use it to make tea.
I've seen that. I don't recommend that.
And they call it Anayu, and they call it the ARG. Like, it's interchangeable.
Yeah.
They'll take the flowers and candy them and put them on ice cream and stuff. And it's such a blood mover to me. That's kind of frightening to me.
I mean, the big caution with any of the artemisias, but the mugwort and related species in particular, is it's very warming. It's very specific for the uterus and invigorates the blood, i.e. will bring on the menses with gusto.
So people it's so funny what we get charges out of. Somebody's like, yeah, I just bought one. And the Kristen's like, yup, it's considered traditional moxa. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Depending on where you are, they would say, oh, this is the one.
Yeah.
And so
there's a bunch of both, and native species even here in the North America are used interchangeably for it as well. And similar kinds of traditions, I would argue all of them bring on the enhanced dreaming. The relaxed state, the mug of beer kind of idea that it becomes radical thinking.
Yeah, that's funny.
But all of it can also be used as moxa. And like, honestly, a bunch of old Chinese guys rolling over in the grave for what I'm about to say. But you can harvest it any old time, hang it up, dry it, and just by massaging it, you can make an effective mugwort. That said, there is very specific harvesting instructions for the finest grades of mugwort. And you can find some of the specifics online. There's been some really detailed articles written about it that's fascinating, of at what moon of which month it should be harvested, at what time of day, and how it should be dried and processed to create, like, literally you can pay a couple of $100s a pound for the finest grades of mugwort or for moxa.
Well, the other thing that goes with that, like to support that, and maybe it's that the Chinese medicine was traditionally a shamanic practice, really, is that people will pay me to harvest theirs at the right time for certain witch practices. Like, this time it's for this, but the same exact plant 3 months later, it will be for this.
And it's fascinating. There's some Facebook groups on Moxa Africa, and some other ones. And our primer textbook in acupuncture school was called CAM, Chinese Acupuncture Moxibustion. And you'll find that most acupuncturists don't use moxa at all. And there's some charcoal ones. I don't like them. I don't
Which
use
is a
them.
whole arm of their practice.
Yeah, exactly. And so in China and Japan, and I'm sure in Korea as well, there are moxa glasses for eye care. There's moxa things for the head and the ears. They actually have moxa beds where you just lay down, they throw a blanket over you and just smoke all of the moxa up through it. So there is endless, and I mean, there's scarring moxa that's used on children for childhood asthma that's supposed to be amazingly effective. I used indirect moxa when I was very, very sick after getting out of the military. It was moxibustion that literally saved my ass, because I would sit there every single day, sometimes twice a day, doing moxibustion on my specific acupuncture points. And I'm a wimp as a patient, so I rarely got acupuncture. It was too intense for me, where the moxa was actually pretty intense in its own right. I would just sit out on my porch there, and I would do indirect moxa over half a dozen points. So every single day, I got this subtle and effective acupuncture treatment that I was able to do on my own. So it only cost me $1 for this stupid stick back in the day. And really, really powerful medicine. And it's funny on those occasions when either we teach about moxibustion or that I do more than a few rounds on a patient. I'll have some crazy dreams, and I wouldn't say I'm high, but I'm a little happy and a little extra relaxed at the time.
No, I love it. I get wackadoodle.
Yeah. What else we got?
That's it.
No.
Yep. Do we want to talk about anything about the animal practice? Do we want to talk about congenital heart failure? Do we want a question about COVID? Can you think of a particular thing you'd like to
actually, there's interesting things that have come up recently. One of our practitioners at the clinic has a focus of her practice on mental health
this
issues.
Is a great one, considering what we dealt with.
Yeah,
even my
and it was. I was actually one of her teachers for at least 2 years, and she passed me up in particular, not just in mental health. And although I see my share of more emotional health things, she really focuses on some of the more complex and difficult cases of things like bipolar and psychosis and so forth. And she's, most of us, if we get one person a year who's dealing with bipolar, they're usually on medications and stabilized. She's dealt with dozens at this point of people, specifically with bipolar issues. And it's one of those things when you see one particular pattern and the responses, and you hate to generalize, but she said, and there's at least 2 types of bipolar issues that are recognized. And there's a number of things that are mimic bipolar disorder. She says that every single case, the trigger is gluten. And that when she's gotten people off of gluten 100%, that they stabilize. So, I find that absolutely fascinating. Because I've also seen, and some people are sensitive to gluten, some aren't. I've seen every single case of rheumatoid arthritis, RA. I've seen gluten as the primary driver for flare-ups, and people have been able to stop their immunosuppressants and all their other creepy things that they take for that. By 100% giving up gluten, and if they have one slice of pizza, one dinner roll, it will 100% come back. And certainly no shortage of digestive issues that have a relationship to gluten. But the idea that our mental health is dramatically and dangerously affected by something like gluten. The other thing that...
Can I ask you something about that? If it's possible, because I understand the concepts between energetics, if it's possible for you to give the top 3 or top 5 things that you would do to help support somebody, so something like blood sugar or gluten, could you list out like 3 things to always look for in somebody that had mood swings, maybe that wasn't even diagnosed, but you're seeing them go manic, and then like maybe it'd be helpful to name 5 things that would be supportive, or 3 things that would be supportive.
Yeah, let me finish on the bipolar, and then we'll come back to that.
I meant bipolar, with the bipolar.
Yeah. So the other thing that I think is important, and I did not know this, she researched this one out as well, is for some types of, and there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and then there's some subsets of that. So just as a general rule, I just don't do it, especially within Chinese herbal medicine. But a lot of Western herbalists use mimosa. Mimosa is an amazing herb. It's the tree of happiness. We have He Huan Hua, He Huan Pi. Mimosa can cause a manic episode with bipolar issues. And so rather than trying to guess whether they're bipolar 1 or 2 or one of the subsets, it's better to just don't give mimosa to anybody who has bipolar. And it's also important to recognize that there are a number of Chinese herbs that contain gluten. And so the Xiao Mai or Fu Xiao Mai that is frequently in our emotional health formulas, both are a type of gluten/wheat. As well as we have trace amounts of gluten in things like Shudi Huang, the prepared Romania, and in Yi Ren, which is Job's tears. All of those, and Shen Chu, the medicated leaven, may contain gluten. It just depends what they've made it out of. So even the trace amounts, when we're dealing with the stability, the mental health stability of somebody, and that being I'm going to say she's an expert in dealing with it, there is such a dramatic impact of anything containing gluten. And half the other disorders that we deal with. What you were asking, like blood sugar, definitely the ability to digest, and so making sure the stomach acid is healthy for a variety of disorders, but mental health issues as well. The quality of our food, so looking at healthy proteins and fats and moving away from those fast sugars, that the roller coaster ride of blood sugar can be an issue. And for most folks, and there are some exceptions, we actually just learned about this the other day, there's some unique genetic traits where high dose B vitamins can be an issue. But as a general rule, I would say B vitamins can help be a mood stabilizer, in particular B6. But I prefer things coming in B complex. In the most extreme cases, I would say starting with low dose and working your way up, and also ensuring that there's absorption with that, and looking at healthy fats. One of my favorites I actually learned at an AHG conference a million years ago. I think it was Will Morris or somebody on a panel there. Looking for essential fatty acid deficiency or imbalance, so checking the back of the arms for bumps. So on the triceps right here, looking for rough skin or acne-like structures there, shows an essential fatty acid deficiency. So a lot of mental health issues can be stabilized through higher dosing of healthy fats.
So I did that for a reason, because
Triggered all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, like I knew that we would get instigation, and all of this is your fault.
I figured.
I did it for a reason, because I knew that we would get instigation with some of this, because I know that our people get really irate when we don't like hand them a pill or hand them some like heavy herbs. They think we're crazy when we're like, oh, you need some probiotics and some kale soup or something. Right. And they don't understand that their processing is off, and therefore
a little protein in a vegetable goes a long way.
Yeah, it's for sure. So then Owen writes, do you think that many of our mental health challenges could be neurotransmitter issues, too much, too little, imbalances, relations to others, and not enough blood flow to the front of our brain, resulting in depression or lack of motivation? I have so much to say about this.
Say it.
Yeah. And so what I will
I
tell
may
you,
or may not agree with you.
Yeah, no, what I will tell you is I have had several concussions, And what I do know is that in the times, because I teach about neurotransmitters in our classes, in the times that when I have blood sugar issues and endocrine system issues that are directly related to the hormonal signaling and how everything is repaired and how everything works, I have issues. Like, it's something that when my injuries are worse, my illnesses are worse, I see the neurological symptoms when my fats are off, when my processing is off, my endocrine system gets off, therefore the signaling does not happen, as if the transmitters are damaged. So I do think that that is an issue. But what the other thing I have to say about it is, unlike the medical establishment would say, I think it's repairable. I think that we can go a long way to new ones repairing and soothing the issue with, like what you were saying was the fat. I think we're too much fake things to mess it up, and too much low fat things.
And I think that's really, rather than you need a neurotransmitter supplement, and we do, like, you can go and buy all of those supplements, and the reality is they don't work half the time. And so I'm going to say, think more about what are the disruptors to your neurotransmitters. And it's a short list. Outside of, like, you're sitting there with your finger in a light socket, what we find is that we're looking at inflammatory substances that we're putting in our body. And those could be as obvious as red dye number, oh God, who knows what's up there anymore, to artificial sweeteners, to sulfides that are added, the metabisulfides, artificial preservatives, that those are such simple ones to go after. And then looking at our foods, my running joke is, I love me some Chinese medicine because they really keep it fairly, it always seems complex on the front end, but the reality is it's the most simplistic thing in the world. We look at those tastes and their relationship to certain organs, and we're not supposed to have just one or two of those flavors. We're supposed to have all of those flavors, and we can change the ratio of our foods on those flavors. And so, we look at salty, sour, acrid, sweet, and bitter. Sorry, I'm cheating. I happen to have it written up on the board. I'm like, I didn't have to think because my neurotransmitters are done at this point.
And he hasn't had enough food and water.
Right, exactly.
Too much caffeine.
100%. Yeah, I was going to go there. And so the American diet consists mostly of sweet and salty. And the sour cream and onion chips don't count. Sweet and salty. And so starting to incorporate those high sulfur-containing dark green leafies, to look at fermented foods, to look at preserved foods, and in starting to incorporate this wider range of flavors. But then we can look at more specific things. One of the things we use so much of, if we're looking specifically at like neurotransmitters and all of that, it's our brains and surrounding protective tissues can become inflamed from all of these weird things like aspartame and so forth. And so we love using things like Gotu Kola, not because it's a super brain food stimulant, because it seems to have this anti-inflammatory effect with a focus on the brain tissues. And so looking at the things that are not helpful, and that includes caffeine, even though people use green tea extract. It makes you more alert because you're jacked up on caffeine, just like guarana and yerba mate and black tea and coffee. All of those are helpful in the right amounts, but we start slamming 3 monsters a day and a couple of 5-hour energy drinks, we're now going to cause some sort of a dysfunction. But also, as we look at the signaling of our body, we have to make sure that we have all the materials that our neurotransmitters need. We need B vitamins. Those are vital for so many of the different things, and that is dependent on eating a wide range of foods and proteins and the ability to break them down in our stomach, i.e. we need adequate stomach acid, and it's very, very common either from taking antacids, prescription or over the counter, or just low stomach acid for any number of reasons, to have enough mineral intake and that breakdown by the stomach acids, and fats. And when we look at the signaling of our body, if we look at the hormones, if we look at the nerve function, the synaptic gap, all of those are very dependent on fats. And in a society that loves no-fat, low-fat crap, we frequently end up with those fat deficiencies, the healthy fats, or the ratio of our omega-3, 6, 9s becomes significantly out of whack, and we end up with too high of an omega-6, not enough of the omega-3s and 9s. And so,
Bacon fat.
Yeah, that's right. Too much bacon fat, burnt bacon fat at that.
So we do have a comment, but
Yeah.
So I'm gonna prompt Bob for this question, but he answered it in what he said. So we might collate his answer to show you where this was. This slightly agitates me because I don't want people thinking they're dirty, but I understand this. Is there a specific detox for mental health? And I think that it would be safe to say,
Go camping.
take away, no, ready? So take away fake sweetener, fake preservative,
Yeah.
fake coloring, and caffeine. Put in oxygenation, so belly breathing, gotu kola, bacopa, betony, healthy fats, healthy mineralization,
And-
extra water.
And I would argue the mental health detox would be get the heck out of the city and away from the computer.
Because you're breathing, you're drinking water,
Yeah.
you're moving your
And,
system.
and I joke, but I don't joke.
No, it's misfiring, yeah.
Go to the beach, go camping, go for a hike.
That's mineralization. Like you
Yeah,
said.
get the heck out of that. And because
And don't take hot dogs with you. Take something else.
you have to wild forage, and it is there is not, and the only way to detox is get the crap out of your diet and drink some water, go for a walk, make sure your poop is moving. Otherwise, it is a waste. And if we spend a lot of money on some fancy detox that literally costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and we go right back to McDonald's and Coca-Cola, what's the point? There literally is that you might as well just have eaten the money and pooped it out, because it doesn't have a purpose of that. But a lot of times when we look at our mental health, especially when we're not talking about bipolar or schizophrenia, things like that, although we could, if we look at our emotional health and that role of stress in every illness, in autoimmune disorders, the whether we talk about sympathetic, parasympathetic, the HPA axis, all of those things, and in particular, I think they're so similar or are identical, they're just different ways to think about them or different aspects of them. In particular, I like to talk about the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system because it's the thing that we can have the most dramatic impact on. And so when we talk about sympathetic, we're talking about that fight or flight and freeze. All three of those are a part of that adrenal gland. Oh, there's a saber-toothed tiger going. How do I fight him off, or how do I run away and get back into my safe cave? And we don't have saber-toothed tigers anymore, but we have the boss and the bills and the job and all of those things that are these little micro saber-toothed tigers gnawing away at our shoulder and neck that causes pain. And we don't get a chance to do the opposite, what our parasympathetic nervous system is, which is our rest, relax, respiration,
That's
heart
also
rate.
the belly breathing. I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
that,
I'm getting to it. No, I'm building to there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so when we talk about that parasympathetic state, we refer to it as our vagus nerve has a role in that, because our vagus nerve is responsible for digestion, it's responsible for our respiration, our ability to rest and relax. And so we look to our vagal tone. And there are a number of ways to strengthen that vagus nerve to help us literally exercise leaving that sympathetic nervous system and going into that state of relaxation. And belly breathing is one of the best, literally making your diaphragm go up and down. Belly breathing, baby's breath, diaphragmatic breathing, there's lots of cool names for it. You can actually find, I've got a video teaching that on our YouTube channel, the Tradition School of Herbal Studies. I actually go through the whole long version of that, because there's a version of mental health, that internal dialogue, that is, when we stress breathe, I don't do it well on camera here, but when we take that deep breath, all of my energy went up and goes up here and feeds the monkey mind, not the relaxed mind. And so we want the opposite of that. We want the floor of the chest cavity to drop out, the diaphragm to come down, and so our belly will expand as we take that belly's breath. But there's some other interesting techniques that we can utilize. Singing, humming, chanting are all effective techniques to strengthen our vagal tone. And I always argue that every religion in the world has some version of that puts in a state of relaxation. When we do, Hail Mary, full of grace, Om Mani Padme Om, I don't care. We're doing rhythmic chanting and breathing, the reciting of prayers out loud. You don't say them in your head. You have to say your prayers. You have to continue these rhythmic chants, and that is about saving ourselves from the saber-toothed tiger. It puts us in a state of peacefulness. And so, not to say you need to go join the religion of your choice, but at least a verbal expression of something in a rhythmic way. And I would say singing will do it. Death metal may not be the best choice, but it is somewhat rhythmic, so take your choice. And for those of you who don't sing, that would be me. I'll hum along happily, or I'll practice my belly breathing. And our goal is to try to stay in that parasympathetic state of relaxation. And so when we look at our immune system, when we look at irritable bowel syndrome, when we look at blood pressure, so many of these things, yes, diet has a role, but so many of these things are a state of contraction and a state of sympathetic stress and discontent that sets us up to never be able to rest properly, both physically and energetically. So to take us briefly, going big circle here, taking us out of that state of sympathetic nervous system overdrive and going out into a place of peace. So go walk down the garden path, go walk in a park, go to the beach when nobody's around, and sing, hum, whistle, or say a prayer or a chant will literally start to strengthen that muscle of relaxation. I know that seems contradictory, but it's for real. And if you get really bored, just research the vagus nerve. It's amazing. It's the longest nerve in the body. From head to toe, it has a role in all of it. And sadly, in my English class in high school in the 11th grade, I was taught the role of the vagus nerve in the hiccup and that side stitch or cramp. And it helped me to treat Hiccup Girl back in the day.
You have 5 minutes. I didn't know how long you wanted to
Any other questions that popped up? I'll go down some
comments about, I love Bob's belly breathing video, LOLOL.
We'll try to remember to post that into the YouTube video when I upload this.
Yeah, 100%. And then we had Kristen say one of the best things I ever learned from Renee is the EFAs for the skin on the back of your arm thing. That's Bob. For sure, and no, that's it. And so you got the 5 minutes to either say something.
I'll say we will be here again next June, it's we're going to keep doing this open forum until I get tired of it or people stop showing up. So I appreciate y'all showing up.
Gather your questions.
Yes, please send in your questions in advance, but it's okay if you don't, as long as you join us. And for all of those folks who listen to this afterwards, you can still post your questions, and we'll try to remember to copy them over. I think we may next year, although I may create a Facebook event, it will be to a Zoom link. So you won't have to pre-register. We'll put the Zoom link in there. But I want to be able to see the comments and so forth as well. I think the Zoom is a little bit more user-friendly platform and opens it up to folks who are not on Facebook for a variety of reasons. So watch for it being on a new platform so you can join us. And regardless, we will be uploading this to the school's YouTube page, Tradition School of Herbal Studies. And if you joined us at a random time, I'm Bob Linde. I'm an acupuncturist and herbalist practicing Western Chinese and tropical herbal medicine here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And Renee. There's Renee, who is also a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. I hope you join us for our animal class. There are so many of our other fun classes, either in person or online. We do have the opportunity that you can join us online. We're doing Zoom on everything. You can learn more about us at acuherbals.com or traditionsherbschool.com, or come by and visit, check out our cool gardens and all the other cool stuff that we have at the office, with a full apothecary and a medicinal plant nursery hiding in the back that nobody knows about, as well as a crystal shop. Or you can still sneak into the school before we finish putting the fence up sometime soon. Nice
Bye.
to see you all. Please leave your comments and
Thank you,
questions and
everybody. Your
share
comments are
around. We love you all, and I hope we see you in a class someday soon. Good night. How do I turn this thing off?
You're so funny. Just stop your presentation. Tell me when you're completely off.